It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Hey guys, how is it going? And welcome to the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. It is Wednesday, August 2nd, and so happy for you joining us. We are ready to start another day together with the Lord. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. Today we have an exciting podcast for you. We have Health is Happiness, the Bible word study on foundational books of Christianity, and of course commentaries, updates, and news on what is happening around the world in this history today. Woo! All right, everyone, how are you doing? Yes, today is Wednesday, and we have the Wednesday service tonight. Hope you guys are really looking forward to it. So make sure you pray for your preachers and make sure that they have that spiritual strength that you can give them. If you haven't yet, go ahead, leave a like and comment below to build our community. Just super happy for everyone leaving comments and likes, and this community is getting stronger. I can feel there's more people who are commenting more deeply, more insightfully, and I think it's a good testament that we're pretty transparent here, and we're also doing things in a way that allows people to enjoy this community even more. Okay, so let's get up every day, guys. Let's support each other on the Morning Star Drive and all the other programs that we have. This week's title is Learn Only From Me. Yes, very, very deep message, and hope you guys are gaining a lot from it each and every day. For me, dude, I just said dude to you guys, when the most of you are girls, right? But I am just exhausted today. Like my muscles are aching. Last night I went to play basketball again, my second time within like 3 or 4 years I haven't played basketball. And basketball is a hard sport. And on top of it, I'm playing full court. So I'm not even playing half court like I usually did before. I'm exhausted. And I would say it's better than last week because, last week I was just getting back into it, didn't win a single game. Today, oh man, won the first 2 games. Third game, my body just broke down. Like the way it works is you play. You can if you keep winning, you play up to 3 games and then you sit off. We won the first 2 games and the third game just died. And from the rest of the night, I had zero energy in my body. It was just really, really hard. But it was good because when I had the energy, our team was winning. Right? I just didn't have the energy after that to play. It's full court, don't have the conditioning to do it. And I know some people are thinking, is it age? And I think, yes, it's part of it. But it's more so that I just don't play enough sports every week to get my conditioning up to that point. Like I'm on the bike or jogging on a machine when I go to the gym like almost every day. But it's way different than playing sports. And basketball, for those of you guys who know basketball, it is such a condition. It's so intense, right? Soccer, you're not going to always be sprinting, but basketball, you're like sprinting all the time. So yeah, I just got to get myself back into it. I need to play more than just once a week, or I got to start playing soccer and other sports too, just so that my muscles and my body can get up to par, so I can play like these full court games. But like even last week was brutal because I worked out 2 hours before playing basketball, and yesterday I didn't even work out. I just I'm gonna play basketball, so I'm gonna not gonna work out, and I lasted 2 games. Third game was gone, absolutely gone. But today, man, just dying. Actually, the pre-dawn was good. Pre-dawn was good. I didn't have a problem with that. It wasn't really like I was tired. It's just my muscles were aching. So got to do a lot of stretching. And I'm probably going to exercise probably later tonight instead of in the morning like I usually do. All right. Lately's kind of interesting. Just a couple feelings that I've been having is I feel like I'm ready to go to another country right now. You know what I mean? I just want to go out, run in another country. But I am growing attached to these guys here in Vancouver. I really am. Like, they are really good guys, and I just love hanging out with them. They're like 19, 20 years old, but they feel like I don't feel a gap. They don't treat me like I'm a pastor, which I think is great because I want to just hang out and have fun with them. But on the flip side, well, maybe it's the flip side is maybe my mind is of a 19-year-old. Like, that could be it, right? But it's just really cool hanging out with more guys and stuff. And one of the things that I'm super moved by them is they're going strong at pre-dawn. Like, they've been doing regular pre-dawn for the past 2 weeks during the 70-day prayer condition. And guess what? Like we talk, and like even though they're really tired, they're doing really well. I think probably in the last 2 weeks they haven't missed. I think maybe they missed once or twice, maybe. And these were guys that were never attending pre-dawn before, never, right? But they were, they even though they weren't attending, they knew in their hearts they wanted to do it. They just needed someone to challenge them. And, the only thing that I'm really worried about is like we're just starting and it takes time to get your body used to doing pre-dawn. And the only thing I'm worried about is if I leave too early, then they might not be ready. They might not be, there is not part of their, not their habit. It's not a fully habit to them, or their body hasn't really changed yet to get used to pre-dawn, that if I leave, they're not going to continue, right? And, it just takes time. And sometimes it just takes someone to lead you, hold you by the hand in the beginning. And as time goes on, you realize like, oh, this is not too bad kind of thing. And you're able to, what do you call it? And then later on, they're able to do it on their own. But, we've only been doing it for 2 weeks together. But so far, really, really happy that they've come so far. And they're doing such an amazing job. Like, I'm really, really proud of them and stuff like that too. I'm proud of myself also, but yeah, I got to work on my conditioning because these sports are just crushing me right now. Today we have a new interesting section for today's Bible word study. Every Wednesday I talk about Bible verses, scriptures, origins of how books came to be, how the Bible came to be, and I wanted to try something new. I wanted to go into foundational books that shaped Christianity. Right? And, this is just one of the books I'll go into today. It's from St. Augustine. He's a bishop of a place called Hippo. And he is like one of the Latin fathers of the church and probably the most significant Christian thinker after St. Paul. Right? And he wrote this book called Confessions. And this came out in the year 400. So it's right at the cusp of when Christian persecution ended and a new time came into being where Christianity was the state religion of the Roman Empire. But this is supposed to be one of the quintessential books. Of course, the Bible's number one. And they'll say that, Confession is probably in the top three, like besides the Bible, top three books that really influenced Christianity to develop, the Christian theology to develop too. So this is a book, and it's not a small book. There's like 15 books, I think, 12 books. I'll get into a little bit more deeper a little bit later, but there's a lot of books involved with it. And it's supposed to be a recommended read, but it'll take time to read it because there's volumes and volumes, right? But I'm going to start talking about it, the book Confessions by St. Augustine, Bishop of Hippo, today in the Bible word study, just so that people will have ideas of where, like, the theology, the doctrine all came about, right? What was the genesis of this type of thought that we have even today in Christianity, right? And, if it shapes Christianity, it's also shaping the way providence came about too. So I will get into that for the second segment today. Oh, have you guys seen the poll yet? The poll came out. I put a brand new poll out, and it looks like there's already about 40 people that have actually did the poll. Right? And the poll is very interesting. It is, when you evangelize, what is your most important goal? Like, when you evangelize, is your main goal to make brides? Is it to bring salvation to people? Or is it to preach just to spread the gospel, like preach the gospel as much as you can? Like, what do you think should be the number one thing when it comes to us evangelizing? Right? And I think this is a very, very good question that I will get into on Friday. On Friday, we will talk about this poll and what should be our number one thought when it comes to us evangelizing, right? Gosh. Barbie is on fire, meaning the reason why it's on fire, I have people texting me every day. Every day they are texting me texting me in my DMs and stuff and the comments to go watch it, right? They're telling me that the movie is deep. They're telling me that girls would love the movie because it empowers them and stuff like that too, and that's great, right? However, for me, it's only girls telling me how great Barbie is, which is, for me, is not a really good sign because that means only girls are going to enjoy it, right? Not a single guy has told me how good it is. Not a single guy has told me, and even when they tell me that it is a good movie, right? yeah, if there's not a single guy telling me that, then it kind of tells me that it's maybe more geared towards girls, and I think it is, right? Or girly guys, or what? I don't know what you call it, but yeah, it's not for me. Is if some guys, right? Maybe some guys are closeted, meaning they don't want to say anything because they feel ashamed and embarrassed for watching it, right? But I hope not, though, because I would love to hear an honest opinion from a male perspective on the movie, right? And that would actually be more convincing to me when a guy says to me like, "Oh, actually, it was pretty deep," or "It was really good," or like I want to get an honest opinion from a guy, like not like you know what I mean? Like there's not going to be a girl standing next to them and they're going to be like looking at them with fiery eyes and they're like, "Oh yeah, Barbie movie was really good. Oh, I really loved it." I would just love to hear a guy telling me what they honestly think about it. And that's something that if there's a guy out there that watched it, please leave an honest comment below. And do not worry, we are a very transparent society. Community here in MSD. So if you do have like negative comments, trust me, the girls are very transparent. They'll be transparent of how angry they are at you. But yeah, I just the fact that there's a lot of people who watched it and such, and they're giving great reviews, and even though they're all girls, it kind of does push me a little bit more to take a look at it. Like, maybe not in the theaters, but I do want to take a look at it now, just so that when all these people are saying, "It's so great, I love it, oh my gosh, girl power, let's go, this is so amazing," right? When I hear that, if I haven't seen it, it's hard for me to say, please stop it," kind of thing, right? But yeah, it brings me to think a little bit more about it, right? Oh, there was a comment. Remember yesterday I talked about the Uber study on behaviors of male and female, and why do, because this Uber study done by Harvard in 2018, because Uber is, there is so much information because it's an automated system. Everyone has an equal chance to make money on it, yet men still make more money than women on Uber, right? And this is something that's quite interesting because in this study, like when you look at Uber, it's kind of like it's like a unionized environment for Uber, right? Tasks are similar, hourly wages are identical, tenure dictates promotions. Female workers on Uber are earning 89 cents to every dollar that a male worker, the male worker makes, right? So I thought this to be quite interesting, and there's just so much information from these Uber apps that I think more than like the person was on comments was telling me like, "Oh, maybe does it really mean guys are more ambitious?" And the main thing we're looking at is male and female behavior and why they make these choices. Right? And because there's so much information on Uber, there's thousands and thousands of drivers. That's why they say this is one of the most comprehensive studies because there's too much information out there, right? And yeah, like this person brought up, what if they have another job? And it's the same thing with guys. What if the guys have another job? Right? What if the guys have a family? Like you can say the exact same thing about males and females at the same time. Do they have another job and everything else? But the biggest insights when you start looking deeper into this study is the choice, why males and females make their choices and why there is an earning gap. Even though all things are exactly the same, the pay is the same, everything's the same, why is it different? Right? So I went into the study itself, and I want to look a little bit more deep. I wanted to look a little bit more deeper into it, and there's a couple of things that they were able to take from this research of all the data they received. So this might help you out a little bit better because what I shared to you yesterday was basically kind of like what do you call it? Like a summary of it. So I'm going to do a little bit deeper insight into this Uber study between the choices that males and females make, men and women, right? So in this, when you look a little bit deeper, one of the things that you'll find is that women value time away from work and flexibility more than men. Right? What does that mean? So the women are valuing that time like not working. They like that time being away. They like the flexibility of not having to work or working whenever you want, right? And one of the examples is women take more unpaid time off and they'll use what you call, in America, they have the Family Medical Leave Act, and they work, so they'll use that more than guys. And also on top of it, women work fewer overtime hours than men. So let's go deeper into that. So when overtime hours are scheduled, right? So overtime hours can be scheduled up to 3 months in advance. Okay, 3 months in advance. And if you look at when it's scheduled overtime work 3 months in advance, men and women work a similar number of hours. However, when those hours are offered at the last minute, men work nearly twice as many, which means men are more willing to, like, all of a sudden there's like overtime coming right now. Men are twice as more likely to take that overtime work right away. When it's like planned 3 months in advance, it's the same. But you see that men will take that opportunity more than women. And when selecting work schedules, women avoid weekends, they avoid holidays, and split shifts more than men, right? And the reason is women want to avoid unfavorable work times. And women seem to be prioritizing their schedules over route safety and select routes with a higher probability of accidents. As interesting that is. So women prioritize their schedules, and their schedules are more important than route safety, and they'll take routes with higher probability of accidents, right? So when someone brings up like, oh, but women care about safety, interesting thing is their schedules matter more than route safety. Their schedules matter more, going into bad areas or selecting routes with higher probability of accidents, right? So that is quite an interesting thing they found in the study too. Also, they found out that women are less likely than men to game the scheduling system by trading off work hours at regular wages for overtime hours at premium wages, right? So when you look a little bit more deeply at it, yeah, there's different choices that men and women make, and it's not because we're not looking at this and saying men are better than women, and that's why they're making more money. It's just what women value more than men, right? Women are valuing the schedule where men value the money, right? So it's a little bit different in the way that they are, that men and women value their times. But I think it's a very, very interesting study. And I think you guys should go, those of you who want to look at it, look up the Harvard Uber study, men and women, or male and female. It's very, very interesting, very comprehensive, tons of data. And, you can see that, yeah, part of ambition is like, if you have ambition, you're willing to sacrifice things more than the other, right? To make more money, right? To gain more. And yeah, if that's it, then even if someone has 2 jobs, the men still are willing to make the decisions to make even more money and sleep less, right? Or they don't care more about the scheduling. They care more about how much they can make more money, where the women are valuing more of their flexibility, their scheduling and time like that too. This is not about who is better. This is about the values of men and women and how they are and how they're different, right? So I suggest, like, this is only parts of the study I'm looking at. You guys can look even more deeply into it. But I think it's very interesting because it's just showing the difference between how men and women think, right? It's just a big difference. And I think that's something that we have to take into consideration, okay? Because, like one of the things that we have the Man Cave and Provipuff is to just kind of open our eyes to how different we are to each other. It's not about who's better. It's just we're different and we need to understand each other in a much different way. Oh, some great news. I heard some amazing news the other day when it comes to the peaceful protests, like the demonstrations that they're doing in Korea. So the last demonstration, they had about 1,000 people, I think. It might have been more. Like I heard it could be up to 4,000, but I heard it was 1,000. But there is a huge protest Providence members are doing on August 15th. And, to us, August 15th isn't a special day, but in Korea, August 15th is a very symbolic holiday. It's a National Liberation Day, where they celebrate the day that both North and South Korea were liberated from Japanese rule. So this is the day, basically, I think 1945, August 15th, is when both the US and the Soviets were able to help liberate the Koreas from Japan. Right? So that's a really, really big celebration day. But on that day, on this day of liberation, there's going to be a huge peaceful protest in Korea from Provi members. And, obviously the symbolism about liberation. So it's great that they'll use this day to have a protest. But from what I heard, there's going to be like 15,000 people attending. 15,000 people attending. That's crazy. Like, that's going to be wild. And I think that's going to be historical. If you guys are going to, this is going to be in history, I think, where they're going to see that 15,000 people came up unashamed, coming, like saying, hey, guess what? We're here in this history and this is unfair, right? This is so unfair what is happening, right? And it'll kind of open the public's eyes to all the things that are going on with this trial. Like, even I heard some other news about the trial too. Remember I told you that I believe it was on the 16th, right? It was 2 days before the 21-day prayer condition ended. They applied for a judicial recusal because the judge was already considered biased. But interesting thing I heard, like, we heard it was supposed to take anywhere from like 1 to 2 months for that for the decision to come out for that judicial recusal, but it was already rejected. Already, like, it's been only weeks. It's supposed to take months, but it was already rejected, which is kind of crazy, right? That, it came out so fast. It was already rejected by the courts. But one thing that I found was super peculiar, I was talking to my friend about this, is that there is no transparency on why the recusal was rejected, which for me is really interesting, why there wouldn't be transparency on that. They just tell you it's rejected and they don't have to tell you the reason behind it. Like, even in, when it comes to the Supreme Court in America, the judges have to write down why they feel they made this decision. And there's also going to be a dissenting decision. Basically, the people who were against that, decision in the Supreme Court. Because remember, there's like 9 judges. And let's just say they won 6-3. Then someone who's representing the 6 will write down the reasons why, and it's open to public. And then the 3 people who rejected, they will also write their reasons why they disagreed with it, right? And that's something that we have to look at and say, oh, like, that makes sense, because you'd want to know why it was rejected. But in the Korean system, they don't have to tell you why they rejected it. And like here, like this is something that's why I like transparency. And of course, there are limits to transparency because some things are top secret, right? Some things are not like absolutely checked yet. But, like, even if they're not hiding anything, even if the courts have a great reason to reject that judicial recusal, the fact that there is no transparency means that people have no choice but to not trust the system that's in place. And this is why it's really important. Like, for me, that's why we have to think about to ourselves is transparency. Even in the Morning Star Drive, what I do here, I believe it's important because it allows us to have more trust in the system and not less. And I think, like I said, even in the past when it comes to transparency, even more so in the Western countries than the Eastern countries. Because I can see, I know that a lot of Eastern countries are going to agree with the Western style of more transparency. But if you kind of look at the system or the culture of Eastern culture, it's like you listen to the older person. The person who has a higher title, you listen to them, right? And there doesn't need to be a reason for it. You just have to listen to the person who's above you, right? It's a system in education where it's not about discussion. It's about me telling you how it is, right? So, I can see why it's a little bit different. Because if you give out, if you have a society that's about those who are more respected because they're older, they're more respected because they have the title, like the last thing you want in a group-centered society, where Western countries are very individualistic, the reason why transparency is even more important in a Western society is that everyone can take a look at the reasonings and they can all have their own opinions on it. Right? And they could be split up into two factions, right? Like one agrees and one doesn't agree. But if you look at an Asian culture, it's much different because it's group thought, group centered. So you want everyone to think the same way. And it's like, hey, this is our decision. Okay, we agree. Let's move on. But, when it comes to stuff like this, and there's been a lot of corruption of the system, I think this is why a lot of people are now not happy, right? That there's no transparency. Right? You want transparency in a lot of, especially when it comes to major decisions that's affecting people's lives. Because if you think about it in the future, imagine they just say that you're guilty and there's no reasoning behind it. Or, oh no, we reject your the reason why you're saying this. Then you're like, why? Like, why would you reject it? Like, no, you don't have to know. Like, that is something that I think it made me think a lot more deeper and made me think why I need to start this podcast where we can really have transparency, talk to each other about the things that we're thinking about, whether it's about, Sunsim's trial, whether it's about the things that are going on in Korea or other countries, or like slander, or like there's a lot of things that we just need transparency in, right? And we need, like the one thing I do want to make sure is, I want to make sure that it's a real thing, right? I don't want to bring up stuff that's like gossip, and I don't want to bring up stuff that is not checked yet, right? And this is why it was interesting, because even when I started reporting about the trial and stuff like that too, I would have people on the other side saying to me, "Don't you value transparency? Why don't you say this and why don't you say that?" And in my head is like, well, because it's not even checked. Right? I'm going to base it off what you're saying to me, and I have no way to check this information. And that's something that I do think is very important, is if it's not checked, it becomes gossip, right? And if it's not checked, sometimes if it's something that I'm like, oh, I'm not sure if this is true or not, I have to say, I'm not sure about this, right? Let's get in, let me figure this out a little bit more, right? But, it's something where we have to really, really understand it at a much, much different and deeper level too. But the good thing is, like, even though that judicial recusal was rejected with no transparency, the good thing is Sunsim's team has appealed the rejection. So, that means they're going to take a look at it again. But I really, really hope that these demonstrations of these members going out, and this, August 15th, where 15,000 go out, I really hope it kind of opens people's minds to, hey, wait, this could be different than what we thought about Sunsim and the situation. Because 15,000 people, that's a huge impact, right? It's amazing to see. I love it because it's just amazing to see these members in Korea just standing up for this history, not afraid for people to see who they are, and just telling people that this is so unfair. And I do believe, right, it will eventually open people's eyes to the situation, because, one thing about Koreans is they are super sensitive to injustice. If they see a hint of injustice in this trial, they will go against the government too, and they'll rally together, because they know that if anything, they don't want to have injustice. And this is why these demonstrations and peaceful protests are a very vital part of the Korean system. And, like one of the things that Koreans really, really hate is like, what are they called again? Chaebol? Oh, I forget what the name is. They're like rich people in society in Korea. They get treated differently than the poor, right? There's like a two-tier system where the rich people get off easily, and the poor people, get the short end of the stick kind of thing. They don't like it. So when they see the government or injustice in their system, eventually when they finally realize that there's injustice, they will stand up for it. So I hope that these protests will open their eyes. And guys, let's pray for it. Part of this 70-day prayer condition, especially with it's like August 2nd right now, right? Which means August 15th is like, if you include today, is like 14 days away. If it's 14 days away, 2 weeks, in your prayers, let's really add a condition to like what we're praying for, that on August 15th, when the protests happen, that there will be an impact on Korean public opinion, an impact on society, where people begin to realize something's going wrong with this trial. And I think this will be a great prayer that we put into. All right. So I hope it's something that all of us can really look at and be able to aid through our prayers. All right. Yeah, so that's a bunch of stuff that I want to talk about today. I hope you guys will really, really enjoy it. It's been a great and wonderful Wednesday. Hope you guys have been enjoying it. So let's move into the first break of the day.
Like photographs, they're clear in my mind. I dreams that we have hoped for until now, the will that we have kept without a doubt, they become my soul's melody, the beautiful song my spirit sings, the days when we took action side by side, the blessings that have now become all mine. I will live eternally, recalling those moments vividly. La 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 la, la 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 la. La 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 la, la 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 la. I will remember forever and more. Now because of you, I can live without worry or shame, for my whole life has changed. The dreams that we have hoped for until now, the will that we have kept without a doubt, they become my soul's melody, the beautiful song my spirit sings, the days when we took action side by side, the blessings that have now become all mine. I will live eternally, recalling those moments vividly. Dreams that we have hoped for until now, the will that we have kept without a doubt, they become my soul's melody, the beautiful song my spirit sings, the days when we took action side by side, the blessings that have now become all mine. I will live eternally, recalling those moments vividly. La 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 la, la 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 la. La 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 la, la 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 la. I will remember forever and more. La 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 la, la 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 la. La 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 la, la 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 la. I will remember forever and more.
Alrighty, so let's get into. Did I say alrighty? That's like a total Canadian Jim Carrey. Alrighty then. Let's get into today's Bible word study. And yes, I'm going to try something a little bit new today. I do want to get into foundational books of Christianity that has affected the theology, the thinking of Christianity since the beginning. And today I want to, of course, the Bible is the number one book that affects everything. However, there have been another 3, 4, 5 books that have really changed the landscape of Christianity. And today I want to go into the book called Confessions. And it's an autobiographical work by St. Augustine. Okay, it's got 13 books. It's all written in Latin, and it's all written within 3 years, from like 397 to 400. So this is right at the tail end of the Roman persecution. And the work outlines like St. Augustine's sinful youth, his conversion to Christianity, and modern English translations are sometimes published under the title of The Confessions of St. Augustine. right, in order to distinguish the book from other books with similar titles, right? So its original title was Confessions in 13 Books, and it was composed to be read out loud with each book being a complete unit. So this book, Confessions, generally considered one of Augustine's most important texts, and it's widely seen as the first Western autobiography ever written. And it's influential for Christian writers throughout the Middle Ages. And other people, like scholars, say that Confessions will always rank among the great masterpieces of Western literature, right? Not only for Christianity. So a couple things you need to know about this book, right? So number one is people say it's a neglected masterpiece, okay? So this Augustine talks about our souls being restless until they rest in God, right? And that is something that we find in our cultural heritage too, right? And a lot of people read this in university, but it's hard to read the entirety because it's like 13 books. It's really, really long, right? But this is considered literature, a classic treasure, right? And it's something that everyone should read. Now, even though it's an autobiography, the one thing you can't look at it as an autobiography, right? So it's classified as an autobiography, and this is kind of inaccurate. The labeling is inaccurate because the root of most, this is something where people, if you look at it just as an autobiography, you're going to look at it in the wrong way. So this masterpiece, it is autobiographical, but it's not really an autobiography, right? In its structure, it resembles entries in a personal journal more than an autobiography. Because autobiography is like, this is what my whole life was like, this is what I did, this is what I did, this is what I felt during this time kind of thing, right? But it is autobiographical, meaning that it has a chronology of what he was going through in his life, but is not made as don't look at it as an autobiography, right? So it looks like it resembles it, but it's more of a personal journal, right? And it's, of course, is not to deny that the book has features that make it look like an autobiography. Like, for instance, its first-person accounts of his life, right? And its overall organization, the material is arranged according to the chronology of his life from infancy to the age of 33, right? Which is, which also marks, he had this famous conversion at the age of 32. But usually autobiographies are like a narrative of events. And if you look at Augustine's book, expecting a narrative flow, you're going to be, is not going to be like that. And much of the Confessions does not deal with Augustine's life at all. So that's why you can't look at it, don't think of it as just an autobiography. So what the Confession is, this book, Confessions, like sometimes the genre of memoir is rarely applied to the Confessions, but that's probably a better label to put it as a memoir, right? A memoir is a collection of remembrances accompanied by analysis. And it's much more selective and it's a piecemeal than an autobiography, right? And then your gleanings, like the realizations of life that are brought together and analyzed by St. Augustine later in his life. So he's looking back and realizing from it, kind of like, what Sunstein talks about in last week's message. So a memoir is how the author remembers and understands his or her life, while an autobiography is just a documentary history that assembles the facts of a life, right? So Confessions is primarily a retrospective analysis and assessment of what was happening to the author at various points in his life, and the format is heavily reflective, with paragraphs often resembling entries in a journal. And in the process, Augustine tells the history of his heart and soul, and he began to write the book a decade after the last events that he records. So at 43, he begins to write this, and it's about talking about him being a famous, like he's a sinner. He talks about the regrets of his life in sin, right? So it's very, very interesting, and it's a book that they say it played such a huge and distinct role in early Christianity and still affects people today in Christianity too, right? So like Augustine, one great thing is he's a master storyteller. And in this book, Confessions, like the 13 books, it's you're gonna see a memorable gallery of characters, including he talks about his mother a lot also, And by the time you get to the end of the book, you feel that you're part of a network of acquaintances. Like, that's how good he is in this book. It's 13 books. It's going to take some time for you to read it. But the primary story that Augustine tells is not the story of the external events in his life. Instead, he's telling tells three more profound stories all at the same time. And one is the story of his flight away from God for 32 years. And then Augustine, what kind of life that he lived, like a dissolute life of self-seeking, careerism, sexual immorality. So that's a life that he was living. And then he was a latter-day Jonah, engaged in a futile quest to run away from God. But interspersed in these stories, it climaxes in the story of Augustine's conversion, right? And then on top of that, there's another story that comes to the mix, the story of Augustine's quest to find God, right? So this very, very mature author looks back at his flight from God and interprets that flight as an attempt to find God. So the paradox is at the heart of the Confessions. Running from God is actually searching for God. And then Augustine puts a third layer on top of the foregoing two stories, and there's going to be other passages put in between in between these stories also show that Augustine believes that the real story was God's pursuit of him. So today we call this the hound of heaven motif, right? That we're running away from God or we're searching for God, but reality is God is searching for us. Right? God is searching for us instead. So it's a very, very deep way of looking at this. So St. Augustine, he orchestrates his book in such a way that we can clearly see these three threads of action, but you can only see it if you're really looking for it, right? Because there's one part, like part of this Confessions is a book of prayers, right? Is like one of the big parts that people love about these books is that the prayers that make up a large portion of the book. At any point, Augustine is capable of addressing God directly in prayer, and it's impossible not to read the Confessions as a devotional, right? The prayers lend a conversational quality to the book as though Augustine and God are engaged in continuous dialogue, and this dialogue quality is enhanced by biblical quotations and allusions which come to seem like God is speaking back to Augustine, right? So when you're reading this, there's going to be a lot of different interpretations, right, of this too. And there's going to be a lot of direct quotations from the Bible. It'll be in quotation marks, stuff like that also. But I hope that you guys can take a look at this book also. And, people are very honest with this. Very few people have actually read the entire Confessions, all 13 books. But the most famous parts of it are part of, the most famous parts of Confessions. It's about cultural awareness, especially among Christians, right? That they're like these really two high points of the book, along with the stylistic quality. And it's a hope that the readers will receive not to miss an opportunity to read Confessions, right? So the opening of the book is considered one of the most famous openings in all of literature. And it says, "Can any praise be worthy of the Lord's majesty?" And the thought of this stirs him so deeply that he cannot be content unless he praises God, right? So and the climax of the whole book also comes with Augustine's conversion. And that's going to be in book 8. So if you want to get straight to that, there's book 8 in there too. And that's after 32 years of living in vain, living in a very self-seeking, dissolute life, right? And Augustine came to the verge of a breakdown. But while visiting an estate with a friend, Augustine was walking in a garden in total agitation and in the bitter agony of his heart. And he said, by God's providence, Augustine thought he heard a child's voice repeatedly chanting, pick up and read, right? And this is when he began to open and read the Bible, right from the first chapter. So very, very profound story and book. And I hope it's something that you guys will be able to get yourselves into some of these, one of the best literatures for the beginning of Christianity. There's the spiritual value, right? The spiritual value of reading Augustine's Confessions. It basically, people who read it, it changes people's lives. Right? And a lot of people will testify that reading that book changes their life. It's like a written testimony. Have you guys ever heard just a great testimony, someone who was living a life of filth and living in sin, and then how they came to Christ and people are crying while they're listening to it, right? So it's very transparent and open, where Augustine questions God in these books, right? He's got like a lot of introspection in this book and his honest struggles with sin, right? Honest struggles, like, what men really struggle. Like, he's talking about his sexual immorality and such, what he struggled with. And in the Confessions, it's, some people are so into it that they can read all 13 books dozens of times, right? And it's fresh because there's so much to glean from it that you're going to be like, oh, I never thought about this, right? So, Augustine is also, like I said, there's tons of prayers in it. Another great thing you can gain from this is how to pray. Yeah. And, like I said, he talks about it, it's more of conversational, him and God. And it's like God is talking back to him also. And a lot of people, their prayers get deeper by reading his works, right? That now after, like some people will say after reading the book, they find themselves even praying more throughout the day, right? And his prayers are shaped through what he's reading too. So there's like that, people say that there's after reading the prayers, people want to confess more, to praise God more, to see everything in the light of God more. And Augustine is kind of showing people how to turn every moment, every memory, good or bad, into a prayer of praise and thanksgiving. Basically, like what Sunseam says is, look back at those events in life, pray about it, realize from it, praise God that God is teaching us even more deeply through those experiences, right? And Augustine is teaching us to do now what we will be doing forever, and that is to have that deep personal relationship that happens through prayer, right? And another big thing that changed a lot of theology is how Augustine teaches us who God is and who we are, right? So Confessions begins with the distinction between the greatness of God, who is eminently worthy of praise, and us humans, a portion, or like another way you could put it is like a lovely translation of God's creation, who are encumbered by our mortality, by weakness and sin. And yes, we are made for God. We are made with a dynamic orientation towards him, and we are restless until we rest in him. And the Confessions explores the nature of God and the nature of human beings in light of God, right? So in addition to learning how to speak to God properly through prayer, we also learn how to think about God and our relationship to him, right? So it's if there is a translation that people should look into, basically choose a translation that is right for you. So if you're really intimidated by the prospect of reading the Confessions, then get the translation by Friar Benias O'Rourke, right? And it's a little bit more to a Catholic point of view. But if you're going to, like, if you want to go serious or listen to an audio version, Augustine's, because Augustine's culture back then was more of an oral culture, and the confession was meant to be heard. There's kind of like, you can find oral audiobooks of the Confessions also. So choose the right version. I think it's going to be very good for a lot of people just to even start it. Not saying that 13 books is a lot. There's a lot to take from it. But, if you even get an audio version, you could listen to it on the way to work, or listen to it, 10 minutes a day right after pre-dawn or something along that line. But it's supposed to be one of the foundational books of Christianity. Either way. So that is today's going into the book of Confessions from St. Augustine, Bishop of Hippo. And in the history lesson, he is one of the big figures that started the time of bishops, which is parallel to the time of judges in the Old Testament time. So I hope you guys gain something from it. Let me know in the comments if this is a big help for you. I will go over some other books. Like another book I really want to go over later is Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And that's supposed to be another huge book that has affected Christianity also. Okay, so there it is. That is the word study for today. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. So let's get into the second break of the day.
I believe without a doubt the path I'm walking is the will of God. He's by my side. I believe without a doubt the
Okay, so let's get into our final segment on this wonderful Wednesday. Today we have Health is Happiness, and I was looking back at some of the older podcasts that a lot of people haven't listened to yet, and I think this one is a very, very important one by Julius Miumo, and this is about managing your weight, how to manage your weight well, and this is something that a lot of people, especially after the pandemic, and we've gained like 20, some people have probably gained up to like 6 to 10 kilograms over the pandemic time. And, we're slowly starting to come out again and get ourselves back into exercise and such. And sometimes we're getting to a point where we don't see many results, right? And this is a 6-part series, so you know how detailed this is going to be. And I'm sure a lot of people really want to know better of how to manage our weight properly. So we're going to go into a 6-part series from Julius on how to manage your weight. And this is something that a lot of people stress over, but I hope you guys will enjoy this, all right? So everyone all the way over there from Australia, this is Julius Miumo with Health is Happiness.
Hi everyone, Julius here, and welcome to the Health is Happiness segment. Here's where we discuss all the different ways we can improve our personal health for a happy life, both physically and spiritually. This is episode 10, and today we're going to start a new series on how to manage weight. Managing weight these days has become an increasing problem in the modern day. Aside from the fact that we live much more stationary lives, a big part of the problem is the quality of the food that we eat has gone down, knowingly or unknowingly. Sometimes it's even hard to tell what's healthy and not healthy. It also doesn't help that there's so much conflicting information when it comes to health. Now, I've been obsessed with learning about healthy eating for a while, and let me tell you, it can get very, very confusing when listening to different experts. There's so many diet fads coming in and out of fashion, and the noise is just magnified by social media. One thing I can say from what I've experienced and learned so far is that diet is highly personal, and the way different individuals respond to the same foods can vary widely. Still, there are the general rules of health which apply to everyone. For example, eat non-processed fresh whole foods. So what I'll aim to do in this segment is to give you some very simple approaches that generally should work for the majority. But it's important to experiment and try different things out for yourself, while making sure to give things enough time to see significant improvements. 21 days is a good time frame to see how you feel. Now I want to keep today's segment simple and straightforward, and I'll get to finer details in later episodes. Today I'm going to mention some of the simple steps one can try to eat less while staying satisfied for longer and drop some weight. So let's jump right into it. Number 1. Before starting your meal, drink half a glass of water to prevent you from overeating. Number 2. Eat the right combination of foods. There are certain foods that should not be combined. For example, combining fats with carbs, particularly saturated fat and refined carbohydrates, is really, really bad. Basically, it will leave you hungry and tired soon after and is a sure way to gain weight quickly. Not all calories are equal. Compare 2 cookies and 3 slices of plain bread, eaten alone. And suppose both of them have the same amount of calories. You will definitely gain weight more quickly by eating the cookies as opposed to the bread. The exception to the rule are carbs from vegetables. Next, you also don't want to combine protein with refined carbohydrates. This too will leave you tired and hungry later on. It is better if you combine it with a low GI complex carb like sweet potato or basmati rice. Basically, the following food combinations spike your insulin levels way too high, which causes your blood glucose to crash, and this makes you hungry. And it also causes insulin resistance over time, which leads to weight gain. Number 3. Ensure the meals you eat are nutrient dense. If you're eating high caloric foods with insufficient nutrients, your cells are still going to be starving for the nutrients, and this will make you still feel like eating even though you are full. High protein plus moderate amount of healthy fat and a good portion of vegetables is a good combination. Example, just try eating an omelette or scrambled eggs cooked with veggies and have it with your coffee but without the bread. Use 2 to 3 eggs and see how you feel. Other healthy sources of fat include avocados, salmon, and olive oils. Complex carbs combined with protein and very low fat is another good combination. For example, chicken breast and vegetable stir fry, cooked with a small amount of olive oil and a bowl of brown rice. If you want to lower your caloric intake per meal, lower the ratio of carbs and increase the amount of non-starchy vegetables. Non-starchy vegetables easily make you full for the volume of food you eat while having way less calories, so you don't need to feel like you're starving yourself. Now, I know many people tend not to like veggies, but if you use the right herbs and spices, it becomes easy to make a delicious plant-based meal without excessive salt, fat, or sauces containing sugar. Please keep in mind, when I say spicy, it does not necessarily mean red chili hot and spicy. It's very important to enjoy your meals, which is what I make sure to do for myself. The whole idea behind these suggestions is to provide a framework that still allows you to find the meals that satisfies you without you feeling like you need to starve yourself to control your calories. I do not believe that that is sustainable. Yes, you do need to avoid certain things, but that is much easier if the alternatives are things that you actually like to eat. There are a lot of great simple recipes out there. Now, let's move on to part 2. When it comes to managing your weight, there is a very useful tool called time-restricted eating, otherwise known as intermittent fasting, that is very useful. Now, I know that I just talked about not starving yourself, but just bear with me, I'm about to explain myself. It's actually important, healthy and normal for your body not to be consuming food for a reasonably extended period of time. In fact, eating around the clock puts a lot of stress on your digestive system. It's like constantly fueling a car that already has a full tank. Time-restricted eating works really well if you do it matching your circadian rhythm. Having your eating window during the day gives the most beneficial results because your metabolism is primed to burn more calories during the day. This is a big reason why late night eating is associated with weight gain. Now, there are different levels to time-restricted eating, but the basic minimum is a 12-hour fasting window. It may sound difficult, but actually it's not that bad. If you start slow, then work your way up to 14 or 16 hours of fasting, it will become easy to do and you'll reap tremendous rewards. Suppose you eat your last meal at 7 p.m. At 7 a.m. the next day, you've already done 12 hours and you can have your breakfast. Ideally, you want to work your way up to 14 hours at least. But 12 hours is still a fairly good start. If you happen to be hungry close to bedtime, which happens to me sometimes, then herbal tea really helps. If you wake up and feel really hungry, having black tea or green tea is very helpful. It will get you through those first couple of hours before your breakfast. Black coffee without the milk may not be so good for your stomach, so this is a good choice. Breaking the fast with a healthy meal is extremely important, otherwise much of your efforts will be in vain. If you stick with this for 2 to 3 weeks, it will feel very natural, and with a couple more weeks, you will notice significant improvements to your weight. Now, when it comes to time-restricted feeding, there are certain people who should not do a long fasting window, especially over 16 hours. This includes children and developing teens, those who are pregnant or breastfeeding, those who are malnourished or underweight. If you're taking medication, you should talk to your doctor, especially if that medication affects your blood sugars. If you have a history of eating disorders, then it's also good to speak to your doctor. Now, for most people, time-restricted eating is fine. So there you have it. That's it for part 1 on how to manage your weight. Now, if you'd like me to elaborate on any particular points, please drop a comment below or wait till next week because I'll be sharing much more details in the coming episodes. Now, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Health is Happiness, and see you next time.
And there you go. Once again, another wonderful episode. This is an older version, but we have 6 parts to the series of how to manage your weight. And I'm sure everyone is looking forward to this one too. A lot of good insights. And this is only part 1 of part 6. So we have 6 weeks of how to manage your weight properly. Everyone, if you have any comments, go ahead, leave it below for Julius. I'm sure he'll be very thankful for this. Everyone have an amazing and awesome day. That's the end of today's podcast. Enjoy your Wednesday service tonight. Remember, tomorrow is Q&A Thursday, so leave your questions below also. And we'll see you guys again tomorrow on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this. I got my head in the zone.